In the small town of Willow Creek, where the streets were lined with oak trees and the air carried the faint scent of blooming magnolias, there was an undercurrent of tension that no one liked to talk about. The town had a history, one that many wished to forget, but some couldn't let go of. It was a place where the past and present often collided, and where the color of your skin could still determine how you were treated. Officer Dan Harris and his partner, Officer Mike Reynolds, had been on the force for over a decade. They were known for their tough approach to law enforcement, but lately their methods had raised eyebrows. They had a reputation for targeting young black men, pulling them over for minor infractions, and often escalating situations unnecessarily. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, they spotted a black man walking down the street. He was well-dressed, wearing a tailored suit and carrying a briefcase. His name was Marcus Johnson, a respected attorney, who had recently moved back to Willow Creek to take care of his ailing mother. Without any clear reason, the officers decided to stop him. They approached Marcus aggressively, demanding to know what he was doing in the neighborhood. Marcus, calm and composed, explained that he was simply walking home after a long day at work, but the officers weren't satisfied. They insisted on searching him, claiming they had received a report of a suspicious person matching his description. Marcus, knowing his rights, refused the search. This only angered the officers further. They handcuffed him, claiming he was resisting arrest, and took him to the station. The entire encounter was captured on a nearby security camera, though the officers were unaware of it at the time. At the station, Marcus was booked on charges of resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. He was held overnight, his requests for a phone call ignored. The next morning he was brought before the judge for his arraignment. The courtroom was quiet, the air thick with anticipation. The door to the judge's chambers opened, and everyone rose as Judge Marcus Johnson entered the room. The officers, sitting at the prosecution's table, looked up in shock. It was the same man they had arrested the night before. Judge Johnson took his seat, his expression unreadable. He looked down at the officers, then at the prosecutor, and finally at Marcus, who stood tall and confident in his tailored suit. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, "the defendant is charged with resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. We request that bail be set at $10,000. Judge Johnson raised an eyebrow. "Resisting arrest and obstruction of justice? Based on what evidence?" The prosecutor hesitated. "The officer's testimony, Your Honor." Judge Johnson turned to the officers. "Officers Harris and Reynolds, is there any other evidence to support these charges? Any video footage? Witnesses?" The officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "No, Your Honor," Officer Harris finally admitted. Judge Johnson leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "I see. And do you have any explanation for why you felt the need to stop and search Mr. Johnson in the first place?" Officer Reynolds stammered. "We received a report of a suspicious person in the area, Your Honor." "A suspicious person," Judge Johnson repeated slowly. "And what, exactly, made Mr. Johnson suspicious? Was it the color of his skin? Or perhaps the fact that he was walking down the street in a suit and tie?" The officers remained silent, their faces red with embarrassment. "Judge, Johnson turned to the prosecutor. "I've reviewed the security footage from last night. It clearly shows that Mr. Johnson was not resisting arrest. In fact, it shows that he was calm and cooperative throughout the entire encounter. The only ones who escalated the situation were your officers." The prosecutor looked down, unable to meet the judge's gaze. Judge Johnson continued, "Based on the evidence before me, I find no probable cause to support these charges. The case is dismissed. Mr. Johnson, you are free to go." Marcus nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Thank you, Your Honor." As Marcus left the courtroom, the officers sat in stunned silence. They had thought they were untouchable, that their actions would never be questioned. But now, they were facing the consequences of their own prejudice. Judge Johnson looked down at them one last time. Officers Harris and Reynolds, I suggest you take a long, hard look at yourselves and the way you conduct your duties. The law is meant to protect and serve, not to oppress and intimidate. If I ever see you in my courtroom again under similar circumstances, I will not be so lenient." The officers left the courtroom, their heads hung low. They knew their careers were on thin ice, and that they had been given a second chance they didn't deserve. As for Marcus, he walked out of the courthouse with his head held high. He had faced injustice head-on and emerged victorious. But he knew that the fight was far from over. There were still many battles to be fought, many wrongs to be righted, and he was ready to take them on, one case at a time. In the end, the scales of justice had tipped in his favor. But Marcus knew that true justice would only be achieved when everyone, regardless of the color of their skin, was treated equally under the law. And he was determined to make that a reality, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been wronged by a system that was supposed to protect them.